Police officers of Reddit, what's the craziest situation you've been in? Number 1. Showed up to a call once about a baby crying non-stop for hours and no sign of an adult being home. We went into the house and I followed the sound of the crying baby upstairs to find an 18-month-old with her arms duct taped to her crib. I undid the duct tape and it was obvious this was not the first time it had happened. I brought the child downstairs and outside. The mom was walking up the sidewalk of the housing unit and flipped on me. I handed the child off to a patrol and cuffed her. It was the most satisfying clicking of handcuffs I had ever heard. Edit, this happened when I was in the army as an MP. The father of the child was deployed at the time. From what I heard, he was granted permission to return home and take custody of the child. They got a divorce and I believe he won custody. I don't know what happened to her as far as a sentencing or jail time. Number 2. Dad tells the story of a guy he knew who kept getting caught for writing bad checks. He was such a big guy he wouldn't fit in the police car, so they would just meet him at the magistrate office and write him tickets. I know, some trust, but a year or so after this kept happening, he got a call that there was a domestic dispute at the house. So they rush over there and he's got an axe in his hand sitting on the front porch all bloody. They approach and tell him to put the axe down, which he does, and proceeded to tell them that his wife is in the bathtub, or at least her head is. But the guy was completely open and cooperative, didn't run or anything. Asked if he could meet them at the magistrate office and Dad was like, yeah, no, you're gonna have to get in the car this time. Number 3. While serving in South Korea, my team was on patrol in the local drinking village when we heard someone drunkenly singing the US national anthem. At a loss for where this individual was, we finally looked up and there he was, tightrope walking on the ledge of a building 3 stories up. This is when precision of language is of vital importance, especially when dealing with a drunk. The sergeant on scene said, "Hey, come down here." The drunkard said, "On my way," and proceeded to step off. Under the impression I was about to witness my first death, I was in shock. Through some bit of weird luck or science, he glanced the hood of a slightly misted Daewoo truck and slid down to the ground. We ran over to him and he said, "Hey guys, how's it going?" He had open fractures on both femurs and after some makeshift splinting and controlling the bleeding, he was transported to the nearest hospital. Soju is a hell of a thing. Number 4. Definitely the time that an older, mentally ill woman tried to burn her house down because she believed that was the only way to disarm the atom bomb in her attic. I got her to walk with me to my car and get in the back by telling her it was the only place she'd be safe. When I got in and started driving, she started yelling that I couldn't take her to jail because she hadn't done anything wrong. I calmly informed her that we were going to the hospital, which prompted even louder yelling of, "I'm not crazy." I replied, "I don't think you're crazy." She screamed, "Then why are you taking me to the hospital?" I told her, "Well, you were next to that atom bomb, right? We gotta get you checked for radiation poisoning." Her eyes got wide and she said, "Oh no. I didn't think about that, you better hurry." Number 5. First time my brother arrested someone was really funny. He and his training officer were working the graveyard shift and got a call for suspicious activity at a house. They arrive and the homeowner says there is someone sneaking around his house that shouldn't be there. So they start looking around with their flashlights. Grass is really overgrown in the backyard and my brother noticed one of those Fisher-Price kids' car, yellow and red plastic car, moving on its own. They found their guy, naked and high, trying to hide under the kid's toy and crawl away. Training officer says, "Well, he's yours, rookie," had my brother cuff him and take the guy to jail. Number 6. Attended a structural fire in a downtown high-rise. Was tasked with evacuating local residents in case the building collapsed. Third house I went to, the guy answers in a full bunny suit with gas mask propped up in his head. English wasn't his first language, and as I was trying to communicate that he needed to evacuate, it became clear he was running a meth lab inside. Arrested Asian Walter White, and then had to sit in the shadow of the structure fire keeping eyes on the house while waiting for clear, clandestine lab team to show up. In that time fire trucks basically surrounded my vehicle so I couldn't move it, even after clear team moved in. Walter had his lawyer call in my PC, and it was about 10 hours before we could head back to cells. I've never had to piss so badly in my life. Number 7. My dad is a cop and he told me he pulled over a car full of woodchucks, older drunkards from a rural area in the northeast area of the US. He was in his late 20s at the time, so in good shape compared to the drunks. I think there were 4. While my dad was processing the driver, he had him in the front seat of his car. Once the guy realized he was probably going to be arrested, he started ripping the radio and anything he could grab out of his car. He grabbed my dad and pulled him out of the passenger side of his vehicle and onto the ground. My dad landed between this guy's legs and into some kind of leg-lock chokehold. The guy, during all this, has started to scream to his friends to get his gun and kill him. Once he has him in a leg lock, he looks down and says, "Now I'm gonna kill you," before he starts to choke my dad with his legs. I guess backup showed up just in time, or had been there. The deputy at the time hit him in the head with a baton and sent him out. Number 8. Sharing on behalf of my friend who isn't on Reddit, but I showed him this thread and he wanted to tell the story because it's funny as hell. So he's a deputy in rural Louisiana. What follows are 100% his words. Responded to a call from an elderly man who lived outside of town in a nice little house near a pretty dense area of swamp. Dispatch said he was having some trouble with his stove, was hungry, and didn't know who else to call. So 2 of us head out there and were greeted by a nice, but clearly a little off, older black gentleman. We ask him what's wrong with the stove, thinking we just need to light the pilot or something, and he shows us inside. House is well kept, but has a lot of spiritual stuff around. So we get to the kitchen and the stove is chained shut, clearly not going to involve lighting a pilot or flipping a breaker. Dude has a chain, a padlock, and a bunch of rope holding the stove closed. He proceeds to tell us there's a demon in the stove. He doesn't want it to get into the house, so he's locked the oven door so it can't escape. He asks if we'll take it out to the water's edge and let the demon go. We played along, carried the stove outside and rolled it down to a creek bank on a cart, a short distance from the house. He's inside watching out the window as we unchain the door and let the demon out. We roll it back up to the house, plug it back in, and he thanks us like 100 times since he can now cook again without worrying about the demon in the stove. We stop by to check in on him now since we know he's out there alone, and he's honestly a pretty cool dude, just really into spiritual voodoo type stuff. Nice guy though, and we've now bonded over letting a demon out of the stove. By far one of the strangest calls I've ever been on. Number 9. Dispatched to a double stabbing. 2 victims outside, one adult male with a large wound to his neck and his adult daughter with a wound to her scalp. They were in stable condition but I could hear screaming and yelling from inside the apartment. They said the suspect, ex-wife/stepmother, is still in the house with other possible victims. I approached the door and it's already been kicked in and there's a trail of blood leading outside. There's blood on the floor and in the walls, looked like a slasher film. I go in as it is an active situation and luckily an second officer showed up and followed me in pretty quickly. We're inside the apartment and the screaming is so loud we can't hear each other. 2 distinct voices, one yelling mama and the other just incoherent screaming. We start checking doors and find one that's locked. I announce myself but got no response. I then raise my foot to blast the door open. As I do, the family's 18-year-old Down syndrome daughter opens the door and runs at me and grabs me around the waist. Her forehead runs into the muzzle of my pistol. I've never been so close to pulling the trigger and it would have ruined so many lives. Her mother was in the next room covered in blood, but was apprehended without issue. I really thought I was going to bust the door in to find an active stabbing. That was my rookie year. I'm so thankful I didn't immediately react and took an extra half second to identify the situation. Opposite side of the coin though, if it was suspect that opened the door I would have definitely been stuck with the knife before I got a round off. Number 10. This was a house party gone wrong. Some underage kids were boozing in one of the small neighborhoods in my area. Soon they became loud and obnoxious and even started throwing things at the neighbors who asked them to quiet down. The party was at some kid's house, let's call him Gunner. He was one of the cool kids and so a lot of kids came to the party. When they started to throw stuff at the neighbors, that's when they called me and my partner in. We arrived at the scene and everything was messed up. A lot of drunk kids everywhere, too drunk to even run away from us. Some of the cars had broken windows, others were covered with toilet paper. We asked one of the kids whose house it was and we obviously got to Gunner. We asked him where his parents were and he just yelled, "Fuck you pigs, I ain't snitching," and started to run away from us. We obviously followed, but we tried to do it as cautiously as possible because he was an underage drunk kid. We eventually got into the kitchen. Gunnar was just standing there with his back to us and he started laughing manically. We asked if he's okay and asked to speak to his parents. Gunnar turned around and he had a knife in his hand. My partner Mick started freaking out. He wasn't sure if he should pull his gun or taser or with he on an underage drunk kid. I immediately tried to calm the situation down and then I heard an older mature voice. "Gunnar, why the fuck is there a cop car outside?" Enter Gunnar's father, Mark. Mark was a big guy and he had a lot of tattoos, scary looking dude. As soon as he was about to enter the kitchen, Gunnar threw the knife at us and ran. Mark saw the knife flying but didn't see anyone else but me and my partner. He immediately lost his shit. He ran at my partner, punched him in the stomach, then started punching him in the head. My partner plummeted 16 feet through a table. That was back in 1998. Gotta tell you, it was hell, but the guy ended up in a cell. Number 11. My uncle took a call for a mentally unstable person that the police knew. Both him and his partner were standing next to him when he felt a blow to the back of the head. Turns out, the person had concealed a large kitchen knife and stabbed him hard enough that it knocked his senses off. He's on the ground as his partner is being assaulted with the knife, as well on the ground now. He comes to his senses and tells him to stop attacking. Guy gets up and he's ready to pounce, but my uncle shoots him before he can move, nullifying the threat. Both of them receive a Purple Heart from the state.
Thank you for watching and don't forget to subscribe for more stories.